Casting from the basement of La Penta, it's WICR.
Sometimes the weekend calls for all your plans to kind of be put aside. In this past weekend with college football, that was clearly the case, as it is many times. Welcome back to the Sports Vault, everyone. Jersey Joe Archino back here. And obviously, if you tune into the weekly television series College Football Corner, you know that last weekend it was one for the history books. And I think for the most part, the matchups did not disappoint. But I think the one to me that stood out above all of the rest was Oklahoma-Ohio State. And really, it's one of those games where on the road this early in the season, that was a major test for both programs. Oklahoma already was starting off on a very difficult foot based on the beginning of their schedule. Now 2 losses kind of puts them outside of the conversation of being in the playoff. But I think when you look at Oklahoma last season, sometimes, look, you just have to take advantage of a situation when you can, and they did. They faced off against a lot of their toughest opponents when they were down, when they were missing key players, when they just weren't at their healthiest. They took advantage of that. They made it into the playoff. But I think when you look at Oklahoma now, kind of they're showing what we've always kind of known about them. When they play against a team and the team is healthy, the team has all of their decks stacked, they're just not going to be able to get it done. And I don't know if it's an indictment on where Bob Stoops is taking this program or if it's just about how good Ohio State is, but I think maybe the latter part is more of it. And when I look at Ohio State right now, I just think, look, coming into the season, one of the biggest points that people were making about them was they're not returning a lot of starters. And historically in college football, teams that don't return a lot of starters don't win the championship. It's just the way it is. It's history. You look at all the major programs who've ever won something significant, they have had and been able to return a lot of starters. Urban Meyer obviously lost some guys to the NFL like he normally does, but I still think that this is a little bit of a different situation with this Ohio State team. They return a starter at the most important position, and that position is, of course, quarterback. JT Barrett has been sensational, to say the least, in this season so far. 2016 so far, he's had 650 yards, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. The game against Oklahoma, he took control of that game. And I think a lot of times when you're looking at a guy like that, you just want to see how does he deliver when the stage is the brightest. And certainly JT Barrett's been one of those guys where, I mean, you look at his first season where he came onto the scene, had to step in for all the situations that were happening. I mean, you had Braxton Miller kind of slated to be the starter. He gets hurt. JT Barrett gets thrown into the fire. He faces his toughest competition against Michigan State. A lot of people picked Michigan State to win that game, and then what do you know, JT Barrett pulls off an incredible performance. But when I look at JT Barrett and I look at this game, the way that things are kind of lining up for him, he just looks like he has such command, such poise. He's always thrown the ball well. He's always had his athleticism, which he's been able to use. And when I see him and I see him continue to build on that as he progresses further and further, I mean, look, I know Lamar Jackson's been great for Louisville. He does it all with his legs. He can throw the ball with his arm. But if you ask me who I'm taking for a game over anyone else right now in college football, I'm just taking JT Barrett because I've seen him do it not just once, but many times. I've seen him do it in meaningful games. He's got Urban Meyer right behind him. To me, JT Barrett is just the real deal, as good as it gets, and Lamar Jackson's making it very hard for anyone else to kind of be dethroned from the Heisman conversation. But, man, I mean, you just got to put JT Barrett right there with anyone else. And that Oklahoma win, I mean, he just tore them apart. I mean, some of the passes he was throwing, it took Ohio State a little bit to get into the rhythm in that game. But once they did, I mean, I think it became very clear early how big of a drop-off there was between the Buckeyes and between the Sooners. And I don't think that's just between Barrett and between Baker Mayfield. I think that's also between Urban Meyer and between Bob Stoops. And look, you look at Bob Stoops, and it's going down. I mean, look, in college football, it's very easy to see and track the course of a coach's career. And sometimes you start off something with a very solid foundation, then over time, you just continue to regress. And when I look at Stoops, I mean, man, I just don't think this Oklahoma program has done it in the past few seasons. you look at the quality opponents that they've played against, there hasn't been a lot of times when Oklahoma has come up on top, especially in many meaningful ones. And I think clearly the college football landscape is changing so much now. I mean, you look at the rankings week in and week out, and it really is becoming more and more. I mean, Saban is really the only guy who's been able to consistently do it with not the best quarterbacks. But now, even him, you look at him now with Jalen Hurts, I think the days of being able to get by with that game-managing type quarterback are over. And you could see that in the game Oklahoma that Alabama pulled out against Ole Miss. They won that one, of course, in another shootout, and that's becoming the story for Alabama in the national championship game last season. It's a shootout that they got it done against Clemson. In this game against Ole Miss, finally Nick Saban able to get that opponent off of his back. 2 times in a row they had beaten him to this until before this game, and he finally was able to get it done against them. But the game is changing, and I think now it's becoming more than ever. Picking that coach-quarterback combination is so significant, and it's very easy to see who the real ones are and who the real ones aren't. And over time, we've really seen consistency in that regard, but it still means something. You've seen the Urban Meyers up there. You've seen the Nick Sabans up there, and there's a lot of other guys who just haven't been able to do that. And I think you look at Barrett now, and he just has all the mixing to be at the top with anyone else. But huge win for Ohio State. And a lot of people asked me before the season started, I do think they have every chance to win this championship this season. And again, you don't ever want to go against history because history does mean something and it always does repeat itself. But again, while history does always repeat itself, this is a situation like Ohio State that is very, very unique. I mean, Ohio State kind of has broken the mold like they did when they won the inaugural college football playoff championship. I mean, that season, how many people would have picked them if they had been told that Braxton Miller would have been hurt and wouldn't even be able to start the season, and that their Heisman favorite contender, J.T. Barrett, who took over for him, would have gotten hurt and wouldn't be able to finish the season? The circumstances that Ohio State faced their inaugural season are something that I think are unparalleled. And I think when you look at them this season, they're facing similar, different circumstances, but they have something at the quarterback position which can help them override those circumstances. And a huge win for Ohio State, huge win for Urban Meyer, and just a fantastic weekend in college football. You can catch College Football Corner every Thursday. It'll be put up right on YouTube after that, but that is going to do it for this segment. Until the next time, Jersey Joe Archino here with the Sports Vault. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Archino and on Instagram, Jersey_Joe_Archino, and I'll catch everybody in the next segment.